A while ago, I did an episode on hedonism. Specifically, we talked about preference hedonism, which is the position that human well-being consists in pleasure, where pleasure is any mental state that is desired. If you live a life full of mental states that you desire, then that is the good life. Personally, I am of the opinion that preference hedonism is correct. I think it works, and I'm going to try and give you a flavour as to why. Note that when we say the good life, we're talking about prudential value. Value to the person living it, not moral value. Put moral value out of your mind. My own preference hedonism is quite specific. I think that a good life is one filled with pleasure, where pleasure is any mental state that is desired, but only by certain sorts of desires. Specifically, I think the important ones are intrinsic desires. Let me explain. Some things you desire for their own sake. Call those desires intrinsic. Other things you desire because they get you something else. Call those desires extrinsic. For instance, you might intrinsically desire to see your friend and extrinsically desire to catch the bus in order to see your friend. You extrinsically desire something only because it gets you something else that you intrinsically desire. Some desires might be a mixture of both intrinsic and extrinsic. For instance, you might desire to go to university both for its own sake and in order to get a job afterwards. Or at least that's how it's supposed to work anyway. I think that the fulfillment of purely extrinsic desires shouldn't count towards your well-being. That's due to an argument by Fred Feldman. Feldman says, imagine two people in a car who both intrinsically desire to get moving. One of them knows a lot about engines, and so they have extrinsic desires that every little bit of the engine will work. They desire that the spark plugs will spark, and they desire that the pistons will rotate, and so on and so on. The other person doesn't know anything about engines, and they only have the intrinsic desire to get moving. If the fulfillment of purely extrinsic desires counts as pleasure, then by the time the car starts, the first person should be frickin' ecstatic because all those little desires have been fulfilled. Her life should be going way better than the other person's. Now that's an odd conclusion. The fulfillment of extrinsic desires shouldn't count as pleasure because there's a sense in which she doesn't really care about them, just their end results. If she could get their end results without those extrinsic desires being fulfilled, then she would. So I say that the pleasures that count towards the good life are those characterized by the fulfillment of partially or wholly intrinsic desires. Extrinsic desires don't count. And the stronger you intrinsically desire something, the more the fulfillment of that desire counts towards you living the good life. There's a famous thought experiment by Robert Nozick called the experience machine. The experience machine is this imaginary virtual reality machine that you can plug yourself into and it can give you any experience that you want. A little bit like the Matrix. You can even program it to make you think you're living the perfect life, the life where you get everything you want. And you can live your whole life inside the machine and it will modify your memory so that you think that it's real, but it's not. Nozick says that a life inside the experience machine would not be a good life because it isn't real. You think your life's going really well, but actually it's not. And this is what philosophers call an unexperienced harm. You think everything's great, but actually you're living a terrible life. Now, Nozick says that this is an argument against preference hedonism, because he says you can have any mental state that you want, but that doesn't mean that your life is good. I disagree with Nozick, and here's why. If you could live a bad life and not know it, because you've got unexperienced harms, then you must surely be able to live a good life and not know it, by having unexperienced benefits. You could be deluded into thinking that you're living a horrible life, when actually you've got everything you need to live the good life, whatever that is. I don't think it makes sense to say that a life of unexperienced benefits is good for the person living it. They wouldn't say that it's a good life, and I don't think we can say that they are living a good life from their point of view if we never reference their point of view. I don't think that unexperienced benefits should contribute to a good life. I don't really understand what they're supposed to be, so I reject them, and by the same reasoning, mutatis mutandis for unexperienced harms. So yes, I think that I would have strong reason to plug into Nozick's experience machine. Sometimes when I'm really very happy, I wonder if I've done it already. I think that a life inside the experience machine would be good from the point of view of the person living it. There's another famous objection to preference hedonism from Derek Parfit. Parfit says, look, suppose the preference hedonist is correct, that a good life is one filled with pleasure, and pleasure is any mental state that is desired. Imagine that there's some drug that if you get addicted to it, it causes you to experience intense desires for more of it. And imagine that it's a special drug that doesn't poison you, it doesn't have any harmful side effects or withdrawal symptoms or anything like that. And also imagine that I give you enough of it to satisfy your cravings for the rest of your life. Your life will be characterized by the fulfillment of very strong desires. Every morning you'll wake up, you'll have a very strong desire to take the drug, and you'll satisfy that desire. So it should be a great life for you. Even if you didn't want to be an addict, if I forcefully addicted you to the drug, then the pleasure of taking it would eventually outweigh the displeasure of me overriding your autonomy in that case. And Parfit says that if we're saying forcefully addicting somebody to that drug would be a good thing for them, then something's gone wrong here. I think I have a reply to this. So the addict does desire the drug, and they do get pleasure, in mental state that they desire, every time they take it. But people don't just desire experiences, they also have desires about what their desires are about, which I call second-order desires. For instance, someone might say, I wish I was more generous. They desire that they would desire to help people. If someone did not want to be an addict, then every time they experienced a desire for the drug, they are in a mental state that they do not want to be in. Their second-order desires are being thwarted, so for every pleasure of taking the drug, there will be a corresponding pain, and if the second-order desires are strong enough, then that pain could outweigh the pleasure of taking the drug. So the preference hedonist can agree with Parfit that yes, forcefully addicting somebody to this imaginary drug could mean they have a bad life. It might depend on the person. I don't think that there's any particular reason why second-order desires should necessarily outweigh first-order ones or anything like that. So if the addict wasn't bothered about it, then yeah, that could be a good life if we forcefully addict them. But I don't think that we can say that it's a bad life if they're not bothered about it without bringing in unexperienced harms. There are some other famous objections, and they get even more technical, but we don't have time to go into them. I personally think that preference hedonism works. I think that it's a good account of what it means to live a good life. Of course, I'm only too willing to change my mind if one of you can come up with a devastating counter-argument. Whew, that was quite a technical episode. Give yourself a pat on the back if you got this far. I guarantee not everyone did. So what do you guys think? Is preference hedonism a good account of what it is to live the good life? If you enjoyed this video, then for more philosophical videos from me every Friday, please subscribe. This episode was sponsored by my patrons on Patreon: Jesse Austin, Intimidating Scones, DJ MacIsaac, Rich Clarke, John and Marie, Alan Falloon, Jeffrey, Emiliano Heyns, and Horatio Cordero, as well as everybody else who donated. Your names are in the description. So thank you so much to all of my patrons for your breathtaking generosity. Thank you. Last time we talked about horror, and we asked why did people enjoy it? So let's see what you had to say. The Dino3663 and Old Lang Syne said maybe we enjoy horror because it's new, it's got monsters and mystery and magic in, so it's something out of the ordinary, different from ordinary experience. And that's a cool suggestion, but that would explain why people enjoy new and original things generally. It wouldn't explain why we enjoy horror, things that would normally repulse us per se. Brainstuffs said that we enjoy horror because we are attracted to the unknown. And that's quite similar to what Noel Carroll, one of the philosophers we were talking about, said last time. But the problem with Carroll, and with that, is that we can still enjoy horror even when there is no unknown, when you've seen the horror movie before, or when it's cliched or predictable. Those are the arguments that Beres Gort, the other philosopher we were talking about, pitted against Carroll, so not really sure how far the unknown is going to take us there. Daniel Witten said maybe we enjoy horror the same way we enjoy the pain of going to the gym. We think that it serves some greater good by going through it. And that Could be an interesting idea. That's the beginnings of a theory. We'd have to say what that good was, though. Hao Yang said that we enjoy horror because we experience relief when it's over. But the trouble with that is that, by that reasoning, people would also enjoy real-life horrible things that happen to them. They would enjoy every horrible thing up to the point that it causes permanent psychological damage. People would enjoy watching stories of murder and war on the news because, relief that it's over now. So I'm not really sure how strong an idea that is. Butterhook and Thomas Billington suggested that maybe some part of us does want to see horrible things. Maybe some bit of our psychology does want to see things that are horrible or dark or violent, but we say that we don't because it's socially required for us to say that. So maybe we enjoy horror because it gives us a way to fulfill that little dark desire. And that's quite an interesting idea. I think you could turn that into a thesis for a psychology investigation. I think somebody could do an experiment and write a dissertation on that. So that's quite cool. One of the cool things about this area of philosophy, the philosophy of art and the philosophy of creativity, is that it often points the way for science to investigate. We often do come out with hypotheses which could then be tested. So that's quite interesting. Good comment. Austin on Sugar pointed out that horror is a broad church and there's lots of different kinds of horror and different genres and different media. So maybe there's not one explanation for why we enjoy it. Maybe there's multiple explanations. And yeah, that is a good point. That is something that Carroll does briefly touch on. He does say that there could be other side explanations for why people enjoy particular types of horror, like maybe power fantasies come into it, or maybe if it's very gory horror, you get some sort of kick about proving yourself to be tough enough to watch it. So yeah, I think that's an important comment. That's a good one. Bob Sabol linked horror to play, which I thought was really interesting. He said a lot of animals practice their responses by playing, like lion cubs will practice pouncing and hunting by pouncing on the daddy lion's tail. So maybe humans also practice our mental responses to danger through a form of play which is engaging with horror. And that's a really cool idea. Again, I think that could be the subject of a psychological investigation. Bob Sabol was one of my first subscribers, and they always leave really, really cool comments. He's a really cool guy to have in my comment section. So thank you, Bob. I always look forward to reading your comments. They're always really, really good. That's all the time I've got this week. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!